Hey everybody, welcome back to Writing Tips and Tricks for Authors. I am author MD New, and today we are going to talk about character creation. And we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into the development of your characters. All books have characters. So you have main characters, secondary characters, background characters, and they all need to be slightly different. They all need to be unique. What we are creating when we write our stories and when we're telling our stories about these characters is we need to create these rich three-dimensional characters that people believe are real. There's nothing worse than reading a story that has one-dimensional characters that are just these cardboard paper cutouts of nondescript characters that are not memorable in any way, shape, or form. They might have a really exciting adventure that they go on, the story might be exceptional, but if your characters aren't believable or relatable, then the story's a waste, which happens a lot, and it's really kind of sad because an author went to a lot of work and time creating the story, but the characters killed it for the readers. And I know this happens because it's happened to me. I've gotten called out on it by my beta readers, by my editors. They'll look at something or look at a character and go, okay, this character's kind of flat. What's going on here? What, all your other characters are amazing, but you have this character and they're important to the story, so we can't cut them, but they're kind of a dud. Go back in and see what you can do to freshen them up, make them unique, make them have their own voice. So that is a big issue for when we're writing stories. That's why I recommend, if you haven't already seen my video that I did on character sheets and stuff like that, I recommend that you create a character sheet where you go through and you just start jotting down everything you know about the character and build out their backstory, because it's really important and it gives you bits and pieces into who that character is that will help you flesh out the story. So the big thing to think about when you're writing your characters and you're writing their stories is, what is the character's motivation? Now, I don't mean the motivation that gets them started in the story, like they have a death in the family or they arrive at a dark, spooky house, right, or whatever. I don't mean that motivation. I mean motivation that they had before the story took place. What's going on in their world that they focused on? For some people, think about the real world, right? We all have goals, hopes, and dreams, right? We want to get a promotion. We want to write a book. We want to become a best-selling author. We want, all of our wants and dreams. So we want to give these characters some motivation that they started out with. That motivation may not have anything to do with the story, but it's there. In one of my novels, The Calling, the main character, Duncan, his father died of mysterious circumstances when he was very young. One of his personal motivations had always been to find out how his father died. What happened to him? It always played in the back of the head. It kind of affected who he was as a person, how he grew up, but it was a really important part of his life. So he had that part of his background that was there, and it affected who he was. His motivation for doing some of the things he did in the book was to find out what happened to his father. So keep that in mind. It's a great way to tie in why they're currently doing what they're doing in the book, especially if your character, let's say, is going on a quest. They're only going on the quest because they needed money to save the family farm, right? I mean, that's a trope, but hey, it works. Well, they wouldn't have started, even bothered with the quest if they had all the money that they needed, or their family wasn't struggling, right? So keep that in mind. Give them goals, something outside of the plot or the story. And what this means is you may end up having to go back and develop their background story. go back and talk about, write up who they were as a kid, their siblings, their family life, all those types of things, where they went to school, etc., etc. Because that will then end up playing on all of the story, right? And it gives you something where you can go back to and say, well, why are they actually doing this? Oh, well, they're doing this because of this. Okay, that makes sense. It also makes the characters a lot more interesting. Next up, and this is something that's really important for us authors, is especially because we tend to get stuck in set in our own ways, right? What makes this character different from all the other characters out there? Not only in your book, but in every other book that people could possibly read. What's unique about your main character? You know, do they have a mental health condition? Do they have a physical difference? Maybe they are a female character in a male-dominated setting, like a female knight or a female scientist or something like that. What makes these characters different? What makes them approachable for other people? What makes them interesting to a potential reader to want to buy the book? How many times have we seen the white, straight savior in a book? I'm going to pause here and let you think about that. Think about every great movie, every great book that you have ever read. The hero is typically a white, straight savior. Not always, but that tends to be the norm. Well, what we're finding now as authors and even publishers are finding this out is people want diversity. So don't be afraid. Go and make, if you've always wanted to write a story where, the female is the hero and she does all these great, wonderful things, do it. I have a wonderful author friend, who that's exactly what she does. All of her books have these strong, amazing female lead characters. Her name is Barbara Russell. If you ever get the opportunity to check out her writing, I suggest you do. They're phenomenal. She writes some great books, and most of them are all about these strong female characters doing all these great things. I'll link her site in the comments or in the sections below. So kind of keep that in mind when you're writing it. Same with characters of different nationalities and so forth, right? Take what you know, but make it different. Go in and, don't necessarily have to go in with the intention of, hey, I'm going to write this story about XYZ, right? But just think about it when you're developing your characters. It's like, does this need to be this type of character again? Haven't we seen enough of that character? Wouldn't it be nice to do a character like this? So keep that in mind. What makes them different? Next step, and this is something that I'm going to challenge you all on, is push your comfort level. This ties into exactly what I was saying before. Don't make all your characters the same. That is not our world. We are a world filled with rich, diverse people and voices and everything. So when you're writing your characters, push yourself, push your comfort level. If you grew up in an all white neighborhood and maybe had one or two people of color in your neighborhood, that's your reality and that's very valid, but that's not the world at large. So when you're writing something, keep that in mind. And the same is true on the reverse side, right? So if you grew up in a highly Latino or Latina area and all you see are people of color, again, that's not really the norm. The norm is a mix. So just keep that in mind when you're building out your world, building out your characters. Push your comfort level, make sure that all your characters aren't the same race. Make sure they're not all the same religion. Make sure they're not all from the same region of the world. Make sure they're not all the same culture. And make sure they're not all the same sexual identity and orientation. I know that can be a little bit scary for folks, but just think about the world around you and populate it accordingly. The other thing is to try and see things from a different perspective, right? This is all about pushing your comfort level. So see things from the opposite point of view. Think about some of the best villains you've ever seen in movies or read about in books. They don't see themselves as the bad guy. They, in fact, often think they're doing something really good. You know, if you watch Marvel movies, Thanos is a perfect example. He thought he was saving the universe. That's what he believed in. Now, how he was going about it was really kind of bad and not right, but that was his belief. He was a villain, but they gave him a cause that everybody could kind of sit there and go, yeah, but is he? I mean, it's the same with most good villains in books. You sit there and go, I really don't want to agree with what they're saying and doing, but I kind of do. So keep that in mind. The villain could actually be a very good person, but doing things for all the wrong reasons. Or, even worse, they could be doing these things for all the right reasons, but going about it the wrong way. That is really interesting, especially as a writer, because you can play with that. You can really get people engaged and involved just by messing with them in that type of setting, right? You can sit there and go, okay, they're going to fall in love with this character, but they're going to end up just doing these horrible things, but for all the right reasons, right? So it's just something to play with. The other thing is when you're looking at your characters, and again, this falls under pushing your comfort level, is the good guy may not always be a good guy. There's this trope now, which a lot of people write, which are these dark heroes, right? You see that a lot in movies. You read it a lot in books, and they're these dark anti-heroes where they're just they are not good people, but what they're doing is they're not all bad either, but they're doing things that are saving the world. Think about things like Suicide Squad, or a really fun one is Deadpool, right? I mean, I know that these are all comic book movies, but there are other examples out there as well as, where you can kind of sit there and you play with these dark heroes and go, okay, they are not necessarily good people, but man, they're doing what needs to be done. So really what it's all about is, as I said, it's pushing your comfort zone, writing characters that are different from you and what you've experienced, giving your character, good background motivation, and just making them as interesting as possible. Well, I hope that helps you out with your writing, and I hope that helps you out when you're creating your characters. So I've been author MD New. Thank you for joining me again for my writing tips and tricks for authors. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.